like every kid in school, I had a bully or two, and they taught me.
It's part 2 of adding Trainphone antenna to and weathering a Proto 2000 Pennsylvania Railroad EMD E8. When possible, I like to remove clear parts before painting, but if they're glued in or too fragile to remove, covering up is the best option. The windows and detail parts of vintage Proto 2000 series engines are often very fragile. Of the trains I've worked on, most windows seem to pressure fit into the shell. Most are not glued. Old Athearn Blue Box are a good example. Some of their engines had no windshields. A variety of tapes is good. Some I have to order online since I'm a good 2.5 hours from the nearest rail hobby store. If I can use cheap, I use cheap. On this cab, however, to me a curved tape is good for the windshields. Different spots, different tape. Paper self-stick office dots do well for the portholes. It's not necessary to get a precise fit. If the tape covers more than a window, I can touch it up as I go along later. I just want the clear parts protected. Tape the inside, the backside of things too. Good thing I'm weathering, aging this engine. I just found glue damage on the shell. I probably caused it when I was putting a roof fan back in place. Don't get me wrong, I'm not happy I did that, but I have fixed worse. The trick is not to panic. Most things like this you just have to get a little creative. Weathering an old locomotive is not for the faint of heart. About a year ago, something during weathering caused the finish on this Alco PA to crinkle. By the time I could get it smoothed out, it was pretty bad. I can tell you I said a few prayers when trying to fix it. And thank you, Jesus. I think it turned out all right. Easy does it. Don't want to work too quick or I could easily damage it even more. This sandpaper is old, softened with use. I would not recommend using an unprimed new piece for this kind of repair. I'm not saying I was, but if you are not prepared for the possible loss of an engine shell, you might not want to do this. I ruined a vintage Pennsylvania Erie A doing just this. There was no saving it. But, except for that one, all mine have worked out and I love them. Before I begin weathering, Army Painter Varnish. Satin first because it's easier to wipe away or adjust powders, paints, and things than if I started with a flat finish. For example, oil stains are easier to create if the surface is a little slick. I really should have done this before spraying the first coat. I don't need overspray under the shell or through the side and roof vents. It's unlikely, but it could mess up a window from behind. I am not a fan of Tamiya panel liner. Yes, it works, but if you make a mistake, even if you have clear-coated your project first, you can do great damage trying to wipe away excess. I much prefer an alcohol ink. To me, it's easier, thinner to begin with, and very workable until I overcoat it with more varnish. I 3D printed these little ink pots. I would think anything that gives you a small pool of ink to dip the brush in would work. It can evaporate quick, so I don't dispense much at a time. I use 91% alcohol to thin and clean. And I usually have an old t-shirt, soft cloth, ready to dab or wipe things with. Disposable shot glasses are very useful. I use glass if it's something that will hurt plastic. I usually start off with black, inking vents and fans, grates, things like that on the roof, working from top to bottom with one medium before switching to the next. There's no written rules. I can switch things up. My grandfather was a painter. He liked to work in oils. A lot of his work was very basic, but he had an eye for color. If I understand correctly, some people have an extra cone in their eyes that allows them to see more colors. Tetrachromacy. As far as I know, I've never been tested for it, but I seem to have inherited his ability. I believe it was my mother, talking about the way he painted, that told me he had taught her that black appears less in nature than we think, and that burnt umbers and siennas are better choices in painting for shadows and depth. Now, soot is black, no doubt, but oils often tend to be more brown, and sometimes have a rainbow effect that I would never try to recreate in this scale. Just grimy looking brown. I'm not going to need as much black on this Loco as some, but the fans definitely get painted with it. There are often much less expensive non-hobby specific alternatives to mainstream hobby materials. In this case, rather than some pricey weathering powder, some cheap black eyeshadow I got from Amazon. I've done this before. This Tester's Graf Zeppelin is unfinished because I was hoping to relocate, and motors and rigging might be a problem in packing up. But all of those panels were taped off and done with different shades of metallic eyeshadow from our local pharmacy.
You better stop throwing rocks, 'cause this is my sandbox.
I am very aware that the Tuscan red comes across quite dark in this video. I'll do my best to explain as clear I can to compensate for that. But dirtying up a locomotive is not rocket science. One thing I try to avoid is uniformity. Stains and scratches are going to be pretty random, except for the obvious places like the exhaust. I don't want to overthink it or overdo it. I can work pretty quickly, but I pay attention as I go. It doesn't take as much as some might think to give an engine character. No two I've weathered are the same. Some things tend to wear in a similar way. I remember a lot of Southern Pacific growing up and a lot of rusty wheels and bogies. Blowing the loose bits away occasionally helps. That's why it ducks in and out of the camera here. Having done this a few times, I have to think ahead how it will look after a flat finish, and it will look different from the satin that I'm using while weathering it. If there's a fuel door or something, I might put a touch of ink there and dip my finger in the alcohol to smear it downward to look like a spill. Now to start the foundation. Not so much to repair the glue damage I showed you, but to blend it in. A little eyeshadow, a layer of ink, some dry brushing, and it'll be good to go. Straight up, the powder shades and shadows. If I dampen the brush, I can get streaking effects. Using the brown alcohol ink, I look for panel lines, recesses, and the like. I'll run the brush all the way around a panel where necessary, blot away, or blend in any excess. Unless I like how some excess ink looks where it is. It's all up to you. Beauty is in the eye, as they say, and unless you're doing this for someone else, who do you have to please? I'm kind of giving you all the Cliff Notes version of inking because, as I've said before, attention spans being what they often are, mine as well. Well, I figure if I edit right, instead of stretching it out to 3, I can cover the bases pretty well and get all the way through to adding the antennas and done in just 2 videos. When I do use alcohol to clear away ink, I try not to get the swab or cloth too wet. I get better control. Some ink I leave as applied, like the rails on the rear of the shell here, or around the sides of the door diaphragms. I generally outline doors and hatches, but I also tend to blot away and keep the doors themselves lighter than said outline. Now, dry brushing with paint, a color for light dust and another close enough to the base color to add contrast. Again, no two being the same, I've gotten a bit more colorful with others, even adding rusty reds to the body, other shades, and the like. This is an O-scale Williams U33C I weathered a good while back. More shades of dirt on that gray than I think would show up on the almost brown paint of a Pennsylvania engine. Parts I 3D printed for detail are circled. Everybody settles on their own way of doing things. I like a piece of cardboard box to get the extra paint off for dry brushing. The glue damaged spot. A little streak here or there, and done. I am absolutely sure I learned about light dusting from Shep Payne's tips, and not to overdo it. The worn effect adds so much. If you're not sure where to do this, look at an old car for ideas. Can't forget the coupler housing and undercarriage. I'm going to change the couplers, so I'll do those later. The Army Painter matte varnish is as flat a finish as I have seen. I used many a can of Tester's lusterless flat, long gone from the store shelves. After this, I'll add the antenna wire. I found the wire for the antenna very reasonably priced at Pegasus Hobbies, the same outfit that makes Möbius models. It's a German word, one of the last of the true hobby stores on the West Coast. Even if they do sell RC, I'm old enough to have never gotten used to calling RC a hobby. It was a very expensive affectation, mostly reserved for the very wealthy or featured in movies. Toys. Very expensive toys, but toys nonetheless. Classic hobby stores sold plastic models, trains, boats, and the tools and accessories to build them. Closest I ever got to an RC back then was a Cox gas-powered PT trainer at the end of nylon strings. I do love the RC toys we do have, Star Wars, submarines, tanks, but they are not a hobby, by definition of the word as used when I was growing up. I looked at a lot of pictures to know just how to bend and cut the wire. Not all matched. I'm content to come reasonably close to prototypical. Safety. I hold the other end of the wire when I cut it so it won't go flying, especially at my face even with glasses. Threading took a little effort, not all the stanchions lined up. But a lot of old trains took a beating, so it didn't have to be perfect. If you have to bend these stanchions, take it easy, slow. Instead of stressing one stanchion, I spread it out to even things more gradually. At some point, I did paint the stanchions. A white ink marker was very helpful in marking where the bend would need to line up with the hole I drilled. Each end of the wire has a corresponding hole in the shell to go into. Done right, the antenna should not need gluing, and I like the metal finish enough for now. I'm going to leave it. I might paint it later. I don't know. The right and left antenna are not the same. They are bent and attached differently. I bent the one end of this one at a 45-degree angle before running it through the stanchion. Trim and trim again, trying not to scratch the paint, at least not any more than it already looks weathered. Tape removal was a little stubborn, and all left some residue to clean off. I run a lot of mixed brand consists on a track a good 7 feet in the air. I want things to stay coupled. I 3D printed some knuckle couplers I could adapt to each make a while ago, and now is a good time to swap them out. Well, there you go. One reasonable facsimile of that which I hope to represent. And I think the glue damage blended in very well, thank you. So, of all the irons I have in the fire, this one is now cooked and ready to serve. Now, including another A unit and B unit I'd like to weather for this consist, though I'm not planning to upload a video about it. I have enough projects I can't tell you what I'll post next. But Lord willing, and I have no reason to believe he is not right now, I'll be back for too long with another video. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, I would feel honored if you would kindly like, subscribe, and share. Goodbye for now.